Welcome back to Football Weather. Galen, Clavio, Matt Blaszka joining you on an eventful Sunday, October 26th. As Matt, we've got another opening at the highest levels of college football. As we get ready to hit the record button, the news comes down that Brian Kelly, the LSU, well, now the former LSU coach, has been fired by Louisiana State University. This story came together quickly. We're still digesting it. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about a bunch of other things related to college football in this weekend. Hello, Matt, and welcome to the circus, I guess, right?
Wow. We were texting back and forth the last 2 hours. It didn't seem like it was moving in this direction, but it certainly moved really quickly in the last, 20, 30 minutes. So, we have a lot to talk about here, especially this is a big opening. It's a big job, and I'm sure it was on our topic list anyway, but we weren't going to have our usual segment of what's the buyout, but it looks like we do. So
right. Yeah, we keep losing buyouts. It's actually hilarious. I saw a great joke on Reddit about how James Franklin even lost the battle of who got the biggest buyout in a season because Brian Kelly's buyout was bigger. 53 million, I think, was the total. And man, we're going to talk about that. We'll jump right into that story first. First, quick reminder, folks, we are brought to you by Homefield Apparel, your place to go for the finest in college fashions, the softest fabrics, the coolest designs. Whether it's a Montana State t-shirt or an Indiana crew neck or anything in between, they got you covered for college football season, especially as we head into, dare I say it, Matt, football weather. I'll tell you, I needed the long sleeve tee and hoodie combo out in Memorial Stadium this week watching Indiana UCLA. It was a little on the chilly side. That got me through, no problem. As we get into even colder weather, wherever you're at, Homefield Apparel's got you covered. In fact, they just had, and this will be done by the time you all would go on the site right now, but this is why you need to follow them on social media. They had a 25% off hoodies and crew necks sale this entire weekend. Matt, you might be able to take advantage of it if you haven't already, but that's available across the board. So get to homefieldapparel.com, use the code HOME23, and get 15% off your first order. Again, homefieldapparel.com, proud sponsor of the Back Home Network. All right, Matt, give me your initial thoughts. Brian Kelly fired, setting the scene a little bit, an embarrassing loss for LSU that really, they had 3 nails in the coffin already as far as any postseason. They had been underwhelming offensively. They were playing Texas A&M, not just even, but were actually leading the game. And then it was like the trap door opened and all the water flooded out. And all of a sudden, Texas A&M goes on this incredible second half run. Brian Kelly doing Brian Kelly things on the sidelines, yelling at people, and it just was a bad scene. We've seen that before, though, from Brian Kelly at LSU as well as Brian Kelly at Notre Dame. So how surprised are you that we sit here 24 hours later and he's no longer the head coach at LSU?
It's a little shocking that it happened this quickly. There's no sitting president, so it makes it a little bit of more of a challenge from what I've read. It's a little shocking, but I think where they're sitting, they have a bye week, so if you're going to do it in season, this is the time to do it. I keep going back to 2021 when he made the comments. He basically left Notre Dame for LSU to win a national championship. So they're in year 4. The previous 3 coaches all won national championships within their first 4 years, and that's Nick Saban, Orgeron, and Les Miles. And he never got there. His first season was his best season, and they weren't even particularly that great, but they beat Alabama. They went to the SEC championship game. They got blown out. But it never got better than that. They always had an issue. They had Jaden Daniels, and they never had a defense. This year they had a defense, didn't have an offense. And it just seemed like he was never the right fit. The whole family thing back in 2021. And to me, it was a hire that was made out of, what's the guy's name? Woodward, who's always trying to make a splash, and it's just never fit. He's not a Southern guy. Never coached in the SEC, and it just seemed like he was always fighting uphill with the writers, the players. There's plenty of talent down there. There's no reason why you can't win. But it's just a real shocking that it happened so quickly. And all these contracts, right, that were signed, right, not all of them, but now Franklin, and now we see Kelly fired, and now the last one standing is in USC from those big contracts at this point that were signed during that offseason. So I'm curious where they go. I mean, we'll talk about that in a bit here, but I'm curious where your head's at with this.
Yeah, well, I guess the thing that shocks me is not so much the firing, but the fact that you're doing it in the middle of October. It does make sense in that there's a bunch of other jobs of a similar caliber that are right there in the midst that we know are open. Penn State's open, Florida's open. If you're going to make a change, waiting doesn't make a whole hell of a lot of sense, given that, as we've already talked about, when you go to make the next hire, you're going to be fighting against other teams, and you're also going to be having to pick from the non-playoff coaches in most cases. And so that really does narrow the pool quite a bit. I'm also a bit surprised, given I get Kelly's abrasive, and they weren't going to win a title this year. It just feels like there must have been a ton behind the scenes that caused it to ramp up. I mean, there was a really fascinating article by Bruce Feldman in The Athletic detailing how there was a meeting between Kelly and Woodward, and it did not go well, to the point that like all the coaches left the facility, which is generally a bad sign.
Right.
That's one of those where you're going to have a situation occur at some point. Your point about Kelly leaving Notre Dame to go to LSU, citing essentially the resource differential that existed in his mind between Notre Dame and the bigger schools and the ability to win a title at Notre Dame. It is funny on a number of levels because it looks like a complete misread. Now, I don't know that you could have necessarily predicted that things would have evened out to the degree that they've evened out in college football financially and in terms of access to talent. But what's fascinating is even with all the advantages LSU has, Kelly was not able to piece together a team that could win at the levels that you would expect LSU to win at, given the fact that they have arguably the best stadium in college football. They have arguably the best talent in their backyard in all of college football. It's arguable. I mean, you could make an argument about Georgia or whatever, but the Louisiana and East Texas is about as good as it gets in terms of year-over-year recruiting talent and ability. So it just looks like a bad fit all the way around. It is an interesting thing, though, for LSU because much like Penn State, you are gambling on your ability not just to get boosters to pay for the buyout, which they did, but who do you go to? Where do you go to get a replacement? And it's not even a matter, like a lot of people are like, with Penn State, are you going to get somebody better than James Franklin? I've never felt like that's the right argument. But what I do think the right argument is, how confident are you if you're a board of trustees or a board of regents, or in this case, the Louisiana governor who's operating, there is no LSU president. So the governor's meeting with the regents. That was a wild set. That deserves, we need like a political show on Back Home Network so we can just talk about that angle. But how confident are you if you are a board of regents or trustees that the people that you have in place who are going to now have to make the decision about who to go hire are going to make the right hire? I mean, I always think about that with all this money. If you got to make the firing, you got to make the firing, and you got to stop giving people huge buyouts. Otherwise, you keep doing this over and over again. But they thought Brian Kelly to LSU was going to be the winning combination that would bring them out of the muck that happened in the end of the Orgeron era. Right. Much like, Billy Napier was a hire that Florida was sure was going to be better than the previous couple of hires that they'd made. And you can only make those mistakes so many times. And I often ask myself, what safeguards are in place to keep a similarly ill-fitting hire from being made? And the answer is, in most cases, there are no safeguards. You're really just, it's like you lose all of your money in a poker game, and then you go and withdraw the rest of your money out of an account and you throw it back into the same poker game. Like it really does feel like a very narrow window to get this sort of thing right, especially ironically at the big schools.
Right. We talked about this last week with Napier. There's not a deep candidate pool, right? I mean, Lane Kiffin's going to make a lot of money wherever he decides to go at this point, right? I mean, whether he goes to Florida or LSU or he stays, he's going to be well paid.
Yeah.
Putting Lane aside, it's an interesting move at this time because a lot of the sports change now where you're recruiting obviously in December still. You may not have a coach. The window's down to one window, but the playoffs still going on. And maybe some of the coaches that are still coaching is the ones you want. But those coaches now are not going to leave because they're getting paid. So like Signetti, for example, or even Clark Lee, I assume he'll get paid by Vanderbilt. So like it's changed now where like LSU could just say, I can go get this guy, or I can go get this guy because we are LSU. And I think there needs to be a reframing here of what a good season is. And so this is maybe even a different conversation, but there's going to be a lot more 8-4s, 9s and 3s because the conferences are so big, and 10-2s, 11-1s to be able to go to the conference championship every single year. It's just not going to happen. So we're in this change of coaching contracts probably, but also the change of the playoff and how that's going to affect coaching decisions and paying decisions and buyouts and all that. And so there's this large. This is like the reference point for the next couple of years here of how this is going to look, because we're going to still have, like we said last week, we didn't have LSU on our board happening this quickly, but we're still looking for Florida State, Wisconsin. There's still big openings that are going to happen, and we're not even in November yet, right? So it's a really interesting time where I think schools really need to figure out what they want to do and figure out these coaches' contracts.
Yeah, that's a really good set of points, Matt. And I think the biggest one that I would take from all of that is this idea of the reframing of what is a successful season. And this is where I feel like, among many other things, the way that college football gets talked about and evaluated for so long was kind of force shoved through this paradigm of, well, the reason we don't want a playoff is we want the regular season to matter, right? Every game matters. And that's where a lot of the DNA about, that comes out of the argument of, a 3-loss season or a 4-loss season being a bad season. It just doesn't work in this era because, as you said, more games, more conference games, but your season's not over if you lose 2 games or even 3 games. And there'll be a 4-loss playoff team at some point. Yeah, I mean, it could happen as early as this year, depending on how some of the results break. It probably won't, but it could.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also, to me, I think it goes back to what I thought about the overall argument regarding Ryan Day last year. They lose to Michigan. It was their second loss of the regular season. They don't make the Big Ten title game. People are like, they're going to fire Ryan Day unless he wins the national title. Were they the 8th seed? I think they were the 8th seed.
8 or 9.
Because they played they were the 8th. They were the 8th because they hosted Tennessee.
Yeah.
They were the 8th seed. They won the national title. Like, a 2-loss team didn't play in their conference championship game. They make it into the playoff and they string together 4 really impressive wins and they end up winning, the national championship. My point is, now Brian Kelly was not likely to do that, and there were other issues, but I do think writ large, this idea of, when does it go so far off the rails for a team and a program where they're like, this will never be fixable, we have to make a change? If that's how they're making this decision, that's what you should be doing. And I guess you have to do it in the middle of the season. If you're making a change because, well, we've lost 3 games and that's just not acceptable, that seems like a bad way of going about things because of the amount, the trouble it's going to be to ace the hire, regardless of any of these places, with so many other programs open. Like that presents a real problem. I mean, right now is a tweet from Ralph Russo from The Athletic. FBS head coaching vacancies in no particular order: LSU, Florida, Penn State, Arkansas, Oklahoma State, UCLA, Virginia Tech, Stanford, Oregon State, Colorado State, UAB, and Kent State. That's just right now. And as you mentioned, Florida State's still a possibility. Wisconsin's still a possibility. There's going to be some other ones that pop up here down the stretch. This is like there's going to be a lot of bad hires made in this cycle out of absolute necessity. Because once you fired a guy at this point in the season, you are not going to have a chance to do it again next year.
You're right. Yeah. And it's interesting too. Like, they lost to Texas A&M, who 2 years ago fired Jimbo Fisher for 75, whatever. I forget the final number was $75 million. And maybe that's also people look at that. Mike Elko worked out, but he wasn't actually the first choice. If you remember, it was the Kentucky coach,
Mark Stoops, wasn't
Mark
it?
Stoops. Yeah, Mark Stoops, and the Border Regions fought back, and they ended up hiring Elko. Right now it's working out really well.
But see, that's a great example of what I was talking about earlier.
Yep.
Like that was a Board of Regents stepping in and saying, you are not hiring Mark Stoops for this job. And they clearly made the right choice. But this is where I think about it a lot with the buyout conversation. And I think about it increasingly with the head coach hires. Who is doing it? Who's in charge? And this is also where, as we've seen with Auburn
North
and
Carolina
some other North Carolina,
yeah,
you'll get the wrong people in positions of power making power plays. And this is where, again, if you look at Indiana and what Scott Dolson did with that hire, the fact that very few people cared at the university political level about who the head coach was going to be in football allowed him a flexibility to make what may be the best coaching hire of the century. Maybe of the previous century as well. And you're not the idea you're going to get that at LSU, or the idea that you're going to get that at Florida. I don't know about Penn State, but Penn State's, if you read anything about the behind the scenes stuff with the board of trustees at Penn State, you know that there's some tension there too. So that's going to be a fascinating thing to watch as we move through this entire cycle. Where do these guys, who makes the decisions? Where do they go? If you're Lane Kiffin and you just won a road game against a top 15 team in the SEC, you have a clear pathway to the playoff. You could probably do that ad nauseum for the next 5 to 10 years because people want to come play for you at Ole Miss. Do you really want to walk away from that, even for $14 or $15 million a year, to walk into a different situation that you don't have command over? And if it's not a guy like Lane Kiffin who's demonstrating himself, and by the way, if Lane Kiffin's in the playoff, is he going to walk from Ole Miss to go take the LSU job or the Florida job? That seems implausible, I think. Maybe not impossible, but it seems like not the kind of thing you would want to do. These are all really fascinating questions, I think, as we move into this cycle.
Yeah, and the Florida job, do you really want to work in those two spots? Florida has hired, 5 coaches since Urban, right? And they've been given no more than 4 years. So let's say it gets off to a slow start, right? Then they're already be on his back, and like it's the Signetti effect. If you're not good within the first 20 games, Michigan State's already looking to replace Jonathan
Smith.
Yeah. It's like, and I'm not a Michigan State fan, so I have no idea how good of a coach he is, but to give a guy 20 games is like, you gotta, and I understand that rosters turnover and all those things, but certainly there needs to be more of a sample, you would think. And the two biggest jobs typically aren't very patient right now, right? Florida and LSU. Penn State's, it's hard to really determine what patience is for them, but they've only had 3 head coaches the last 60 years. But certainly those big jobs, you got to win within the first years, or you're going to be back coaching somewhere else or sitting on a beach somewhere.
Yeah, it's going to be a fascinating cycle. I don't even know what to make of it. I'm curious where the next. Here's the thing. You mentioned obviously Florida State and Wisconsin. I just want to note, did anybody really have Brian Kelly getting fired on their radar 3 days ago?
No, I don't. I think if they play a close game and lose last night, it's probably fine, right?
So that's the question. Is that really the temperature you want to be keeping with some of these head coaching positions at this juncture in time? And this is where, again, maybe Florida State's like, it's going to be insanely expensive to fire Norvell. And what are we where is, if you had to, just the openings right now, where is Florida State in the pecking order? Is it behind Florida?
It's behind these 3, I would think. Right? Yeah.
Right. So what, do you want the fourth, the crack at the 4th best coaching candidate, hypothetically, in a search? That seems a little bit problematic.
Right. And I didn't even think about that, right? You're right, the 4th best, and that's if no one else gets fired. And Florida State just sued their conference, and Florida State's been this aggressive partner. It's like, do you really want to go to that situation? And it's like these 3 jobs that are open are not easy boards to work with, and Auburn might come open too. So,
and the last piece, and it's not a firing, but we need to mention it given that it was the buzz on Saturday morning. The report that a gentleman who is apparently quite interested in NFL jobs is Texas head coach Steve Sarkisian. And I loved how Sarkisian didn't deny per se the rumor, at least I don't know if I heard him directly deny, but went after the reporter, whoever it was that broke it. That's always a telltale sign of, oh, okay, maybe there's some truth to this after all. If Sarkisian leaves, now suddenly, is Texas a better job than LSU? Becomes an active question. And where do you rank Texas, LSU, Penn State if you had to rank jobs?
Resource-wise, you probably would say Texas, and then LSU, then Penn State. But I would go to Penn State, I would say, because I just think you're more likely to win there based on just not fighting the SEC top echelon every year, right?
Yeah, that becomes the other question. And it's why Florida State may not be that good of a job, because maybe if you can elevate your talent levels to SEC-esque levels and you can roll through a weak ACC, maybe it's a good place to go. But that there's a lot of calculus now as a coach that you're going to be thinking of. And that, what makes the pedigree of a coach that gets hired at the power conference level right now? We were talking about this yesterday with Brian Haynes, or we're not with him, about Brian Haynes, the Indiana defensive coordinator, because there's some question. Indiana's been so good. Do those guys get jobs? And it's like, well, what's the route right now? Like Kirby Smart was a unique case, right? Because Kirby, coordinator at Alabama, goes to Georgia as the head coach, didn't have prior head coaching experience at the power conference level. That's clearly worked out. But we've seen that scenario not work out. And can you afford, if you are a Penn State, an LSU, a Texas, hypothetically, a Florida, can you afford to take a crack on a coordinator at a top program, a la Dan Lanning, or
G5,
or do you go with a G5 or a whatever we're calling, like
whatever that group is? Yeah.
Well, but also, like, I'm even thinking about, do you hire someone out of the Big 12?
Big 12, yeah.
Or the ACC, given that those are clearly at a lower level in terms of being able to compete at the highest levels from a talent perspective and a financial resource perspective. There's a lot of fascinating questions in all of this, and it's going to take a while for us to learn who was right and who was wrong.
100%. And it's interesting too, like these group of 5 coaches that are going to be the big names, I would assume the USF coach, the probably Tulane coach, all these guys, they got to make the right choice too, because like if you whiff, that's your only shot. So there's also that angle. And we also have 2 now big coaches, Franklin and Brian Kelly, probably in the mix for some of these jobs. I don't know. I'm probably more. It seems Franklin wants to coach again.
Yeah,
we're not heard from Brian Kelly yet, but hard to say either way.
Kelly's got some years left in him. I'm just like, at this point, how easy of a sell is that to your fan base? Either of those guys. Franklin, who famously couldn't win the big one at Penn State, and as much as writers would be like, it'll happen eventually, it happens eventually for everybody. It never actually happened. And then for Kelly, it's not just that look, he deserves credit for getting Notre Dame to the national title game. But the fact he couldn't get LSU to a similar spot, and given all of the baggage that you get with Brian Kelly just in terms of his demeanor and his approach to things, it's a much harder sell than what it, I think, would traditionally be. I'm sure they'll get jobs, both of them. But it's hard for me to envision, Franklin. Where does Franklin work out of this group of programs? If you were looking at the top programs, or does he not? Is he one where he has to go down? He'd be a great UCLA coach, but maybe nothing higher than that in terms of the pecking order.
Yeah, I think that's probably where he lands, right? That makes more sense than probably these other, because I don't think he would not last long just based on his kind of his personality and stuff. But at least he's a
little too earnest for the SEC.
Yeah, and he at least he had a 12-year stay at Penn State, so it wasn't like he got fired in year 3 or 4. He did have a run, right, if you will. He was winning consistently, beating the bad teams, got to one playoff and got to the semifinal. But he's also a younger guy. He would seem like the more likely candidate to get maybe that middle tier if he wants to stay in the SEC Big Ten. But I always thought Maryland would be a spot for him just because he's already recruited that area and he's known pretty well. But I guess we'll see. Brian Kelly's interesting. He's 65, I think, or no, 64.
Yeah,
and you're right. His demeanor, brassness is certainly not for the faint of heart for this era, it would seem.
Well, it's like I saw some rumors about UCLA being interested, and I can't think of a worse combo than Brian Kelly and Los Angeles. Talk about it. I don't know what accent he would take on during that press conference, but I don't see that. I just don't see that happening. Let's put it that way. But before we wrap up on the coach stuff, there's another job that's probably going to come open, and that's Auburn. And where do they sit in the pecking order of all of this? Like this is tough for some of these SEC schools in particular.
Yeah, I think Auburn's now in a really tough spot because now they're behind two schools, and that's the one school that the board really controls everything.
Right.
they really do. So I think they're behind LSU, Texas, Penn State. They're going to get a better shot unless they just throw $25 million at Lane Kiffin, which I guess that could happen. But why would I keep going back to why is Lane Kiffin going to leave? He's going to the playoff this year. I mean, we'll talk about this later. I mean, the schedule lines up really well for them. They're not going anywhere. But if you're happy where you are and everything's equal now, it's not like Florida or LSU is going to be better talent wise. It's pretty spread out at this point. I don't think anybody saw that coming. But yeah, I think it's 4 or 5.
A good tweet from Ant Wright. LSU and Penn State were ranked top 4 in the country going into week 5. Neither coach is still there. God,
that's what
a world we're in. It's pretty nuts.
And it's Brian Kelly's birthday, according to this tweet I just read.
That's amazing. All right, let's jump over to recapping what happened in week 9. It was a weird week in a lot of ways, not just because of the LSU stuff. We already talked about A&M waxing LSU in Death Valley, 49-25. Certainly for A&M, they continue to announce their arrival. They continue to get great play out of Marcel Reed. And their defense, I don't know how much credit you give their defense for clamping down on an LSU offense that largely clamps down on itself on a regular basis. But that's still a pretty impressive win, regardless of what's going on at the head coaching position.
Yeah, I mean, A&M going, and that's a hard place to win no matter what year it is. I think they were 19-1 under Kelly before even walking in there. So, I mean, they're now 8-0, the first time since the mid-90s. They clearly put themselves as the front runner for or in the SEC with Alabama. I was impressed. It definitely seemed like it started slow, but once they got their sea legs and scored those 35 straight points, it looked like they were two different teams. And honestly, the most surprising thing was they put up 49 LSU's defense, which that's the one thing that's been helping keeping them afloat all season. And they just ran right through them. So kudos to Texas A&M. Certainly going to be in the mix, probably for a bye at this point. They look like the third best team in the country. But yeah, really, really impressive win from A&M.
Sticking in the top 5, Indiana just waxes UCLA. This is the UCLA team that people thought might pull an upset. Kirk Herbstreit picked it on ESPN. This was not close. I mean, Indiana scored more points than UCLA did within the first minute of the game. Pick 6 by Aiden Fisher. This is such a dominant team right now, this Indiana team. They've got an interesting stretch in front of them with a couple of road games, but at this stage, they've just been hitting on all cylinders on both offense and defense.
It was impressive. I haven't heard your Crimson Cast yet, but I didn't expect that big of a beatdown. I certainly thought they would win by quite a bit, but once the pick 6 happened, I'm like, this is it. Like they were ready to go. Obviously, Cignetti, he is in their ear all week, talking about them being a 3-0 team. They have been the most impressive team in the country every week since the Illinois game. Or I mean, you can count the 3 games before that, but
the Iowa game was kind of the one.
Yeah, it's the one game.
But even that looks like a good win, which we'll come back to. But
I mean, so, I think, and I've even seen now some SEC writers now saying, oh, okay, where this is not, even though they did the same thing sort of last year to some of these teams, this is not your grandfathers or even 4 years ago, Indiana.
It's not your older brothers, Indiana. I don't think we do the father or grandfather thing. Though I'm 99% sure this stat is correct. I haven't completely checked it, so if I'm wrong, I apologize. Only one team in the country in the Power 4 has a 50-point win in conference play. Indiana is that team, and they actually have two of them because they beat Illinois by 53
right.
and they beat UCLA by 50. That's pretty remarkable stuff. Alabama 29, South Carolina 22. Should we be asking some questions about Alabama here? Because that is not a strong South Carolina team, and yet they were leading them by 8 points with,
Late.
3 minutes to play, and then
Yeah.
shot themselves in the foot, as South Carolina has been wont to do this year. Good comeback from Alabama, but to need to come back against South Carolina is a little bit of a head-scratcher.
Yeah, they looked off all day, just watching a lot of that game. I mean, kudos to South Carolina. This is their, they've had a really tough year, 3-4, I think now, right?
3-5, yeah.
3-5 now, yeah. I guess unless it was lost. It seemed like Ty Simpson did play well down the, in those last two possessions to win the game. But certainly they seemed off all day, and it was very weird to watch that because they've been really rocking the last 4 weeks, being those ranked teams for the last month. So clearly they are still one of the better teams in the SEC. This was maybe always going to be a trip up spot right before LSU, and LSU doesn't have a coach, so we'll see how that works out for them in 2 weeks. But certainly it was a little concerning seeing them not play to a really mid South Carolina team, who's also might be firing or their coach might be leaving.
Oregon 21, Wisconsin 7. This was tighter, and I think you have to remember last year, weirdly, Oregon's biggest challenge all season outside of the Ohio State game was that game they played at Camp Randall, where they only won by, I think it was like 3 points.
They had to come back.
Yeah, I mean, Oregon started off with an onside kick, looked like they were in a roll. They really had to grind it out against Wisconsin. I mean, the leading passer in this game at 86 yards, and it wasn't Dante Moore.
Yeah.
So there's something about what Wisconsin does defensively against Oregon that really works, but Oregon just had too much quality. They end up winning this game 21-7. It's an odd result, but it's still a good result for Oregon, obviously.
Yeah, I flipped over to this game when I saw it was 0-0 in the second quarter, and then I started watching it. It just seemed like they were just very vanilla, and it was pouring, so I don't know if that played into it as well. I think I texted you. They're just trying to get out of here with no injuries. But Wisconsin did score for the first time in 3 weeks, so kudos to them. It was a broken play, but hey, I'm sure they'll take it. But yeah, I mean, this is an Oregon team that needs to get their ducks in a row, quite literally, as their next game is against Iowa.
Yeah. Elsewhere in college football, Georgia Tech continues to roll 41-16 over Syracuse. We talked about Georgia Tech every week. There's just not a lot of competition for them in the ACC, and they continue to do absolutely what they have to do.
Just win.
The one thing about them, and we've talked about it before, is there is a big delta between their ranking and the way that the computers are looking at them. This will be a game that will help them in terms of their computer rankings, but they're not playing as well as their ranking would indicate, but that doesn't really matter if they keep winning games at this stage.
Yeah, I mean, they're just going out. Right now they're 5-0 in the conference, right? So I mean, and they still have the Georgia at the end, so they're closer to finishing their conference schedule. Now they go on the road the next 2 weeks, next 2 games. NC State and Boston College. Boston College is terrible. NC State is also the bottom. Yeah, I mean, so they're playing two of the lower teams in the conference. But at that point, then you're 7-0 in the conference going against Pitt. You're sitting really pretty. So not that you ever think to expect Georgia Tech to be 10-0, but at this point, you would think they're going to be 10-0 going into that Pitt game.
Yeah. Quick comment on Miami, Stanford. That looked like it might be an interesting game for about a quarter, and then Miami just hits the gas, 42-7. Not much else to say there. They needed that bounce-back game this week. Ole Miss and Oklahoma, part of our SEC separation series, as I think we'll call it this week, as a man, Oklahoma looked like they had figured this out in the third quarter, and they grabbed a lead, and then Ole Miss figured out a way to make it happen for them. They score in the fourth quarter and then kick a field goal to give themselves an 8-point margin. It was a game Ole Miss absolutely had to have after the loss to Georgia. And it was a game Oklahoma really couldn't afford to lose because at this point now they kind of fall behind in the pecking order about what SEC teams are really in contention for playoff spots. And, I think we talked about this game last week where it's like, well, it felt like Oklahoma needed it a bit more given that they've got to go to Tennessee, go to Alabama, and then have Mizzou at home. and they did not pull it out. Meanwhile, Ole Miss, at this stage, without a ranked team remaining on their schedule and only one loss on the whole season, that's at Georgia. They're not going to get punished for that. They're right there. They're in that unique spot where if A&M trips up, or if there's some tiebreaker that leads to Alabama not being in the SEC title game, then Ole Miss is in great shape. But Ole Miss might be in better shape by going 11-1, not making the SEC title game,
Right.
and then being able to say, hey, we got to win over a top 20 team on the road in Oklahoma. That's our ticket into the playoff.
Yeah, I mean, you said it all there. They are in a really good spot just with the rest of the schedule they have. They have 3 straight home games: South Carolina, the Citadel, and Florida. You would think South Carolina just played their best game of the season. You're right. That's probably as good as it's going to get. And then you're 11-1 or 10-1 going at Mississippi State. However, if they do trip up and they are 9-2 going to that Mississippi State game, we'll probably talk about this next. That's the last team you want to play. And even though they haven't won a conference game, they have been close a lot this year. And their rivals at Mississippi State on Thanksgiving, or on the Friday of Thanksgiving, that's the game that you do not want to be 9-2 going into. So it's really important they win these next 3.
Yeah. That's actually not the next game, but it's
okay.
We're going to do one more before this. Vanderbilt, 17, Mizzou 10. This was a disastrous game for Mizzou. They lose Bo Pribula, maybe for the season. I will say the backup came in, looked pretty good. They had a shot into the end zone at the end that did not get completed. Vanderbilt needed this game. It gives them a ranked win. I'm assuming Mizzou is going to stay ranked unless they really trip up over the next couple of weeks, and it keeps Vandy alive. And all they've got is that loss at Alabama. Now, they needed a win like the Mizzou win, even at home.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you thought that was the LSU win last week. That doesn't look as impressive now that LSU is no longer ranked. There's a fascinating game happening next week now in Austin as Vanderbilt travels to Texas. That might knock somebody out of this equation. Vanderbilt might have a little bit of cushions they still get to play Tennessee at the end, but man, I mean, my hat is off to them for performing in this game, even if it wasn't a pretty game. It was the game that they needed.
It's really cool. It was ugly. I don't know how much you watched it. It was really ugly to watch. It was 3-3 for the longest time, and it just seemed like whoever was going to score a touchdown, that'd be the final score. It ended up being 17-10, so it was very similar. And there was a fumble on the goal line. That's where the quarterback got hurt. That situation. It is interesting. They haven't been 7-1 since the 40s, the 1940s. As we're approaching the next century, the 40s here, right? But
we have a little time left, Matt.
I know we are getting there. We're going to have to reset the clock here, but it is interesting. And this is, a lot of people talk about the Vanderbilt Commodores are 7-1 in the mix for probably the potential SEC championship game if things break right. But they have a chance for the playoff. I don't think anybody in their right mind would have ever thought Vanderbilt would be in that situation, much like Indiana last year. But I haven't seen a spread. Are they favored next week going to Texas? They may be. Yeah.
I need to look that up.
But anyway, that's a really interesting matchup. It's certainly eliminate every week for Texas right now is an elimination game. They can't lose, and certainly they probably should have lost last night.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. It's there's such a good story, and Diego Pavi is obviously having a great season. Looking at the lines for Week 10, it looks like, as I quickly scan, I'm assuming this is an evening game. This is great podcasting, by the way.
That's all right. Put you on the spot.
Texas is actually a 3-point favorite at home versus Vanderbilt, which according to the power rankings makes sense because the power rankings really like Texas. But Texas, it's like watching a death row inmate get consecutive stays of execution. That feels like what's happened with the Longhorns the last couple of weeks. They have to pull one out at the very end at Kentucky, and then they have to come back to beat Mississippi State this last week. And if that's how well they're playing against that caliber of team, I am very concerned for the Longhorns as they've got Vanderbilt at home, a bye week, and then they got to go to Georgia. And it's going to be tough unless they figure out somehow, some way to beat Vandy and then get significantly better during that bye week. It just feels like Texas is riding the razor's edge just a bit too sharply at this stage.
I just don't see them winning 4 games. I mean,
That's the way they've been playing.
Not the way they were playing, and the schedule sets up for 3 top 10 games. I mean, there's probably no argument for those teams being in the top 10 at this point. But it's every week with this team. It's like you just keep hitting. I mean, they should have lost to Kentucky. They should have lost yesterday. It's amazing that they are 6-2 with how this season has broken. Kudos to Matthew Caldwell coming in the overtime for that pass right after Arch went out. It sounds like it's a concussion, so he may be out next week if he doesn't get through the protocol. But yeah, it's a puzzling team. I mean, I guess just like Clemson and Penn State and LSU, these top 10 teams have just not figured it out this year. 4 of them at least haven't, and certainly it seems like, I mean, if they keep winning, they're going to be in. No, there's no doubt about it. They're going to have that. They're going to have their resume for it at 10-2. But certainly, I just can't see it happening just the way they've been playing the last 2 weeks. Oh, I guess they beat Oklahoma, but the last 2 weeks.
Yeah. Only other games I really wanted to get to on the recap: Big 12 games. Texas Tech 42-0, but they lose the backup who had been the starting quarterback to an injury. He's out for the rest of the year. Tech at 7-1, trailing BYU, who goes in to Ames.
That was impressive.
And knocks off Iowa State. That pretty much ends Iowa State as a contender for the Big 12 title game. They're 2-3 in conference. BYU with a true freshman quarterback looking kind of legit at this point. Mm-hmm. And then the other game from the Big 12 I wanted to mention, Cincinnati, very impressive. They beat Baylor 41-20. They're 7-1. They're 5-0 in conference. They're ranked. I mean, this is heady times for the Cincinnati Bearcats right now.
6-1 or 7-1, whatever.
7-1.
7-1, and schedule lines up for them. They play again. Good podcasting. I don't have their schedule up in front of me, but I think they play Texas Tech.
I've got it here. Yeah, Cincinnati's remaining schedule. They avoid Texas Tech altogether. They have to travel to Utah. They have a bye, and then they've got Arizona, BYU at home, and at TCU.
They're going to earn it. Yeah.
They're going to earn it. I mean, if you can go into Utah and beat Utah, you've accomplished a lot. And then to have to play BYU at home towards the tail end of the season is going to be fascinating. So
yeah, no, I know, and I don't want to slight Houston here either. I mean, beating Arizona State after their big win, now they're 7-1 overall, and they're right in the mix. So the conference is shaping up to be a very fun, like we expected. It's been most fun last year. It's gonna be fun again this year down the stretch. So, and obviously, and even Utah. I mean, they're probably not to be in the mix, but they're hosting game day this week, so it should be fun. Fun finish for the conference.
Keep an eye on Houston, like you said. I mean, they got the one loss to Texas Tech. They don't really have a lot of great wins on their schedule, but their remaining schedule is West Virginia, at UCF, TCU, and at Baylor. Yeah. Not exactly a murderer's row of teams, Matt. So, I mean, 11-1 for them at the tail end of the season. They do lose the head-to-head against Texas Tech if that's the tiebreaker. But, man, there's so many moving parts in the Big 12. And the fact that Texas Tech and BYU still have to play means that one of those teams is going to have a loss. And so that game's in 2 weeks. That really is going to shake everything up even more in that conference.
Yeah, and I have no idea what the tiebreakers are once you get past that point. There's just too many points.
People are asking me, like, what do the Big Ten tiebreakers look like? It's like, wait, we are way too early on to figure any of that out. I mean, it is a mess right now in terms of figuring this stuff. Yeah.
The tiebreakers, if they go 12-0, they're even the Big Ten championship. That's it.
Doesn't matter. Yes. Yes. Unless you have multiple 12-0 teams.
Yeah. Which could happen in the ACC, I guess, right? So.
Anyway, we're going to take a very quick break. We'll come back and we will reveal the merit poll, and we will also look forward to week 10, as this will be the first week. It's the straddle week, but the bulk of the games will be played in November. This is our first almost fully week of November football coming up. So all of that coming up here right after this.
Hoosier Nation, are you tired of the same old takes? Say hello to Crimson Cast, the podcast that actually knows IU sports. Hosted by Galen, Clavio, and Scott Caulfield, they serve up sharp analysis, real talk, and just enough sarcasm to keep things interesting. Game previews? Check. Instant reactions? Double check. History lessons that make even our losses worth remembering? You bet. So whether you're tailgating at Memorial Stadium, pacing around Assembly Hall, or just avoiding Purdue fans, Crimson Cast has you covered. Search Crimson Cast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, and join the conversation today.
Welcome back to Football Weather. Galen, Clavio, Matt Blaszka joining you. And let's get to the merit poll. If you don't know the merit poll, Matt and I put this together every week. We each pick what we think are the top 20 teams, and it's a combination of things now, not just wins and losses, but also a lot of power rankings in mind as I try to kind of hit the sweet spot between who's done what and how good they've done it or how well they've done it. Let's take a look. And a lot of similarities. I think it's the first time our top 5 are exactly the same, Matt. So I guess we're just on the same wavelength at this point. Indiana, Ohio State, Texas A&M, Alabama, and Georgia. I will say, like, I'm not totally sold on Alabama being 4th, but I also can't rank them behind Georgia, and I can't find a team that I necessarily think is definitively better than Alabama. So that's why I still have them up at that level. But I do think that they are worse than the top 3 teams, who I feel pretty good about the order that those are in.
Yeah, I was the same. I had a look at Texas A&M a little bit deeper to see if I would even consider moving them up. Like a lot of talking heads did this week. They thought, they're prisoner of the moment. Oh, wow, what a big win at LSU, but they still were not there for me. They're still behind the two Big Ten teams. But after that, I have a cluster of 4 SEC teams, including Vanderbilt. I put Vanderbilt ahead of Oregon just based on the win at home against Missouri, and dropped Oregon just because they didn't play very well against Wisconsin. But it looks like our 8 through 10, while a little different, we have the same 10 teams in the top 10.
Yeah, I had Oregon 6, Vanderbilt 7, BYU 8, Ole Miss 9, Miami 10. You basically had those exact same teams in a different order. I had Notre Dame 11th and Texas Tech 12th and Georgia Tech 13th. And you had Georgia Tech 11th, Notre Dame 12th, and Texas Tech 15th.
Yeah. I think we're really close there.
Yeah, absolutely. Other notables, you had Virginia 13. I had Virginia at 17. You had Cincinnati at 14. I didn't have Cincinnati ranked, but they were my 21st team.
Okay.
And the other notables, Louisville, 15th in mine, 16th in yours. I decided to move Washington back up. Big, impressive win by them against Illinois. I was very impressed by that. I've still got Oklahoma hunting around the tail end of things. A team that entered both of our polls this week, and I think is worth mentioning, the Iowa Hawkeyes. Off of that win that they had against Penn State at home, they absolutely demolish PJ Fleck and the Minnesota Golden Gophers. And suddenly you look at Iowa and you say to yourself, this is a team with an outside chance of not just perhaps sneaking into the playoff, but they could make it into the Big Ten title game. They've got a lot of the rest of the action is going to be decided on their field. They get Oregon, they get USC, they get Nebraska. I mean, they've got opportunities here. It would not be out of character for Iowa to have an out of the blue 10-2 season where they make the Big Ten title game,
Yeah, it lines up, like you said, it lines up well. Oregon and SC the next 2 weeks, and they're actually scoring points. They scored 41 points last week. The defense still solid.
It feels like Gronowski and Tim Lester have finally figured out a passing game that works for them.
Yeah, and that place has always been tough to play. Obviously, IU had a really difficult time. They took it down to the last couple minutes there. I'm really curious to see how that Oregon game goes. I think it's week, is it?
It's I believe it's this week.
No, it's 2 weeks. It's 2 weeks.
Or 2 weeks. It's the 8th. You're right.
Right. Yeah. So, I'm really curious how Oregon comes back after not playing a great game. And Iowa just coming off their biggest win of the season by far. I mean, obviously they beat Wisconsin 37-0, but certainly Minnesota was, as we said last week, one of those teams hunting around at 5-2. It seems like now Iowa's put themselves with Michigan, USC, I guess Nebraska. Is that right in that group? That next tier in the Big Ten to maybe make some noise.
I might put Washington in instead.
Washington too. Sorry, Washington too.
100%. And actually, it's interesting. Both Iowa and Oregon will have a bye between this week and that game that's coming up in 2 weeks. So, looking elsewhere, let's go ahead and dive into this upcoming week of college football. Not a lot going on Wednesday or Thursday or Tuesday, for that matter. Although James Madison they've started to sneak in to the projections on the G5 rep into the playoff. They're 6-1. They play Tuesday, so they played them or a couple of days from now, depending on when you're listening to this. They're at Texas State. That should be a win for them, but that would get them to 7-1 on the season. Again, it's an outside shot, but given South Florida just lost to Memphis, and given Memphis's likelihood that they will lose again, not really knowing what Tulane's going to do, that's going to be a battle worth watching. And that James Madison team's pretty fun to watch, I think, this season.
Yeah, they're pretty good, and they have to. You're right. They're going to have to win out. They can't go 10-2. There's just too much good in the American Navy. Still undefeated, even though USF has 2 losses. They still have they lost to Miami, right? So and they lost to Memphis, but they still have not the inside track, but they still have a chance to get to the conference championship. So you're right. They have to win this game. I'm Texas State and NCAA 26, so I'm a little familiar with that program a little bit, but. Certainly,
have you ever been to San Marcos in person?
I haven't, but
let's road trip next year.
Let's go to a Texas State game and check out the facility. Aren't they one of the new Pac-12 schools next year?
I've lost track.
Yeah, I think they might be.
Okay. Not a lot on Friday, so let's jump ahead to the weekend.
Yeah.
So, where to begin? Well, let's begin at big noon. Ohio State hosting Penn State. So the one thing I'll say about Penn State is none of these games that they've lost, they lost by a lot of points. Now their passing game looked real bad the last time they played, and that's going to be a real problem against Ohio State. I am interested to see how Penn State's defense, if they can recover it all, because they have the talent to go head to head with Ohio State. I doubt they're going to do much in this game, but I am curious to see what kind of fight is still in this team at this point.
It's a curious game, right? I mean, this game is circled for big noon all year, and that this is what's going to happen. But 2 weeks now to prepare for Ohio State with I think his name's Ethan Grunkemeyer. I think that's how you say it.
Right.
Hopefully, getting more reps in it's essentially 6 days to quarterback. But again, it's Ohio State hasn't given any points all year. I think, the spread 20.5 seems a little surprising based on how Penn State's played this year. They, like you said, they've been close all year, and I've said that. Maybe I've said this to you. It still scares me as an Indiana fan going to Penn State in a couple weeks because it's a tough place to play, and they have played close games. So certainly, I don't expect them to win, but certainly I think it's going to be a closer game than most people think.
We mentioned Vandy, Texas. That's also a noon game. Miami, SMU. Man, we've been pointing to that game for a while as one that could be a problem for Miami. Meanwhile, SMU decided to go out and lose to Wake Forest last week.
Yeah.
That was not in the cards.
Nope.
This is a 10.5-point spread in favor of Miami. It feels right at this stage because SMU just continues to trip over themselves at the most inopportune times.
Yep. Yeah, it was a little surprising. That game was ugly when I was watching it. They looked like they didn't play well all year, but it was a little surprising. But it's a big game for Miami. They have to win this. It's their first time leaving the state all year, so certainly they need to keep winning because I'm really curious if 10-2, and we'll talk about this maybe in a future pod. 10-2 might be a really tricky spot for them.
Yeah.
Just how things may shake out in the conference.
I'd love to know the decision-making process that happened at NBC Sports headquarters that led them to select Illinois and Rutgers as their noon kick. But that's what's going to be on NBC at noon. Rutgers, congratulations, first Big Ten win of the season. However, the way that they won, and maybe more to the point, the way Purdue lost that game is just like, whoa. I haven't seen something like that in a while. This is a game Illinois has to win. They're not going to make the playoff at this point. They're 5-3. They're 2-3 in conference, and none of their losses, Indiana, Ohio State, Washington on the road, none of those are bad losses. But you can't have that many losses, especially as a team that was ranked top 15 to start the season and had significantly higher aspirations than wherever they're at right now.
You just can't lose to Rutgers. That's just all I got to say.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a much easier summation. I agree.
Yeah. This is a must win because, like you said, they've had one of the tougher schedules in the Big Ten. They had Indiana, USC, Ohio State, and at Washington for the last 5 games. And to go 2-3 in that stretch was not going to be good enough. They had to beat one of these teams, and they just weren't on that same level. They were certainly either a tier below. But you can't lose these next 4 games, really. They should finish 9-3.
Big game out of the group of 5. You mentioned Navy earlier, undefeated. They played North Texas, who's 7-1 and 3-1, and certainly alive as well in terms of their pursuit for that G5 appearance. This should be a fun one. It's in Denton, and
a lot of points.
Probably. A lot of points. Yeah, it's going to be a high-scoring game to say the least. Arizona State, Iowa State. This is an interesting one to me. Both of these teams are kind of on the outside looking in at this point, but I am trying to get who's the spoilers in the Big 12 down the stretch becomes an interesting one. And Arizona State's already pulled off a big win. They beat Texas Tech last week. They can certainly beat anybody in that conference. They just haven't had the consistency through the rest of the season.
Well, and Iowa State was up 24-10 on BYU. The game was tied. They had that weird kick return that kicked off the guy's foot. So they were in that game until BYU pulled away. It's also a really interesting game for Matt Campbell and Kenny Dillingham as these jobs are opening, right? Yeah. As you pointed out, this is really, really important for one of these coaches probably to finish better, that they may be in the mix for these jobs.
Well, and both of these coaches are probably going to be in the mix, given that Matt Campbell has done about as much as any human being coaching Iowa State could possibly do.
Yeah.
And Kenny Dillingham's been in the playoff. And if you're looking to get to the playoff and you're like, we want to hire a coach with the pedigree of making the playoff, there's not that many coaches that have that pedigree. He would be one of them. So I agree with you on that front. And I think both of these guys will have a high level of stock value regardless of what happens in this game.
Sure.
But if you're trying to decide between two of these guys, this might be the one that helps you make that decision.
Yeah, finishing strong. Like you said, they're probably both on the outside looking in now because I think they're both 5-3.
Yeah.
Finish having a good, a good resume or a good, hey, here's my cards for the next 4 weeks is really going to be important.
Yeah. Indiana, Maryland, 3:30. A big spread for Indiana, 21.5-point favorites on the road. I don't think that's ever happened before with an Indiana team, at least not at the start. But Maryland, they can be a little tricky. I think Indiana's significantly better than they are, but this is another one where Indiana needs to keep pouring on the style points because at this point, staying in that top 4, if you're any of those teams up in that echelon, Ohio State, Indiana, Texas A&M, Alabama, Georgia, the difference between being in the top 4 and below feels like it's going to be pretty substantial this season.
Yep. Are you going?
Yeah.
Okay. I was double checking.
You can come if you like.
Yeah, I can't.
Oh, come on.
I was just in Arizona for 5 days, so I probably.
That's fine. That's what January and February for recovering.
Yeah. Go ahead.
One game we will finally have one of these winless SEC teams become no longer winless. Mississippi State at Arkansas. So somebody will have a decent day that day. Scrolling down to the evening games.
How about Virginia, California? Like Virginia has been playing on this razor's edge for 4 weeks. That's a really tough game going out west, the way they played the last 4 weeks.
It is. Well, and this is the thing, and this is where I have Virginia significantly lower in my merit pool than you do. Virginia's got a bigger version of Georgia Tech's problem.
Yeah.
Which is that the metrics look bad. And I'll note, Iowa State looked that way early in the season, and they kept winning games, and eventually the metrics catch up with you. Yeah. And I think this is I appreciate you pointing this one out because I did skip this because it's a 3:45 kick. It's very odd timing.
12:45 local.
Yes. But Virginia is only a 3.5-point favorite on the road. Cal has looked really good. They're 5-3. They picked up another win on the road last week. They've been pretty game. And you just feel like at some point Virginia's luck likely runs out. Maybe it's not this week, but this is a tough opponent for them.
Yeah, it's just tough. Like you said, Cal's been really good. Not really good, but they've been pretty good all season. 5-3 for them. It's been a long time since they've been this quality. So, and Virginia has to, like you said, they have to keep winning because these 3 overtime games in the last 4, they won by an inch, literally an inch yesterday. It's a fun team, obviously, but you can't keep winning this way and expect it to keep happening.
Big game at Neyland Stadium, Oklahoma traveling to take on Tennessee. Both of these teams are 6-2. They both have 2 losses in conference. I mean, it really does feel like it's the last chance for both of these teams to stay in the playoff picture. And I will note this, Tennessee is ranked 14th in the country, right? Here's Tennessee's wins so far this year. I just thought I'd note this. Syracuse on a neutral field, which at the time was better than it is now.
Yeah.
East Tennessee State, UAB, Mississippi State, Arkansas, and Kentucky. That is the wins that Tennessee has this season. That is not very impressive.
A lot of empty calories there. Yeah.
And so,
and
they're to some degree blessed because all they've got left on their schedule is Oklahoma, New Mexico State at Florida, and Vanderbilt at home. If they can win all 4 of those games, they're probably going to the playoff. If they only win 3 of them, they're not going to the playoff. I think the equation is that simple at this point for Tennessee.
Yeah, looking back, and I can't remember what we said after the Georgia loss. We're like, this team looks pretty good. They had this hiccup. They're going to be fine. But this is probably the first true elimination game of the season. And so for people who hated expanded playoffs, this game would mean absolutely nothing 3 years ago. This is a big game. And, the spread's 3.5 seems about right. Oklahoma needs it. And I know we haven't talked about the Oklahoma coach at all, but he's probably also in the mix.
Venables.
Venables, he has not. They started off well. Now they're starting to struggle, and it's the same thing that's going on with them. And maybe they hold on because we can't have another firing this cycle. But again, this is the first win or go home probably game of the year. It has to be.
I do wonder with Venables because it's like, all right, they're 6-2. They can still make the playoff, but they also have 3 ranked teams in a row for this stretch. We mentioned them earlier at Tennessee, at Alabama, Mizzou at home. I mean, if they finish 7-5, I don't know that they hang on to him. 8-4, you might be able to talk yourself into it. You can say, well, Mateer was injured, but Oklahoma, I don't think is going to sit there and be like, oh, that's great. Yeah, Indiana's in the playoff. Vanderbilt's in the playoff. Georgia Tech's in the playoff.
Right.
But we're not for the second year in a row. Something tells me that won't fly in Norman. So it's a good point on your part there.
Yeah, I mean, and they have the opportunity to do it. I mean, they have the schedule. Like if they finish 10-2, they're in. They're gonna. I mean, maybe Tennessee won't be ranked in the end, but Alabama, probably Missouri will be. Michigan might be ranked, so they're going to have 3 ranked wins, and their losses are going to be Texas, who again may or may not be ranked, and Ole Miss. So, yeah, I mean, to your point, and it goes to another point we were making earlier. We have to refocus our minds on what a good season is, but 8-4 is not going to be good enough based on what the expectations were for this team going into the season, especially how they started the season 5-0.
Intriguing Big Ten matchup: USC traveling to Nebraska. Nebraska on the fringes of the top 25. They were solidly in it before they got blown out by Minnesota a couple of weeks ago, but a nice bounce back win at home versus Northwestern last week. So they're 6-2, and they have an interesting pathway here because they have USC at home, at UCLA, at Penn State, and then Iowa at home. USC, for their part, is still alive right now for a bid in the Big Ten title game. They're 3-1 in conference. They're 6-2 overall, or 5-2 overall. Their pathway, they got to go to Nebraska. They have Northwestern at home. They have Iowa at home. They got to go to Oregon, and then they have UCLA at home to close the season. I mean, if I had to put money on it, I'd say neither team is going to make the playoff. Which of these two, with a win, do you think, or either they win or one wins or the other, which one would be a better bet to make the playoff given the roads that they've got?
I'll say Nebraska, and I don't really trust that, but I'm going to go Nebraska just because I think they have the easier path to 10-2 than even if, let's say, or I guess if they do win that, if they win the game, they'll be 10-2. But certainly their road is easier to get after this game to win out. And so I'll go Nebraska, even though we have not seen any consistency right over the years with Nebraska in the last 15 years. This is their moment to really maybe rise up and do it.
And on the flip side, this is USC's moment to say, we're USC. They're a 6.5-point favorite in this game. It's going to be a fascinating one. I'm really excited to watch this game because it's a marginal game. And it's kind of like what you said about the Oklahoma-Tennessee game earlier.
It's elimination.
It's lower stakes, but it's elimination. But it's also a fascinating set of narratives for these two programs. And when you think about all these other programs, Penn State, LSU, Florida, Oklahoma, who we just talked about, like if you're Nebraska, and I mean, who knows if Matt Rule goes to Penn State. Or doesn't, if Matt Rule loses again here and they're 6-3 and they finish like 8-4, like, what do you do if you're Nebraska at that point? You're just like, I guess this is where we're at. And then if you're USC, you have all this talk about Brian Kelly's buyout and James Franklin's buyout. Like Lincoln Riley's buyout is rumored to be somewhere between $90 and $100 million. And they may have that because they're USC. But again, you're talking about a program who's kind of going to be looking around and being like, all right, are we moving backwards here? Are we standing still? Because it certainly doesn't feel like we're moving very far forwards.
Yes. To both points, right? Another one of those games that, and Lincoln Riley has not won. I said this last week. They have not won these games going into lost Notre Dame 2 weeks ago now.
Yeah.
They've really struggled in these Eastern Central Time Zone games. And so I'm curious if this is the moment for them to finally get off the mat in the Big Ten, because we haven't seen it out of them yet to actually do it.
Yeah.
And to your point, Lincoln Riley has, since he's been at USC, or ever really since Williams left, and was it 3 years ago now? It's been very vanilla. 1 year in the Pac-12, and the last 2 years, or the last 2 years in the Big Ten, it's been really average. No better than Brian Kelly, probably worse than Brian Kelly.
Yeah, and last year, to your point, they lose at Michigan at a time when Michigan was not very good. They lose at Minnesota. They lose at Maryland. These road Big Ten games have not been kind. And, of course, this year they lose at Illinois.
Yeah.
And so there's some fascinating DNA strands that need to be uncoupled from each other in this game. So we'll get a chance to see that. Last game we'll note on the docket for this upcoming week, Cincinnati at Utah, 10:15 p.m. kick. Utah 7.5-point favorite in this game, but Brendan Sorsby, I feel like we should mention, 1,843 passing yards, 20 touchdowns, 1 interception. Scott Satterfield's offense, one of the most efficient offenses in the country right now. This is going to, if I can stay awake for this game, this is going to be a ton of fun to watch.
So the clocks fall back. So I think you have an extra hour for this game if you want to stay up and really want to enjoy this game at night that day. Since
this weekend,
it's this Saturday night, or Sunday morning.
I'm going to be doing time change in Washington D.C.
Yeah.
So I guess that's not the worst thing. I get 1 extra hour of sleep before I have to fly back. That's okay.
There you go. So yeah. So if you're a diehard football fan, it's the perfect 10-15 start, because you get the extra hour of sleep, especially if you have kids. You gotta wake up early the next morning to sort of kind of buoy that how you're gonna do it. But to your point, they should have won that Nebraska game, Cincinnati. They probably should be 8-0 at this point going into Utah. They still have BYU. So if Cincinnati could win this game, that would put them 6-0 in the conference with that BYU game through 2 weeks, meaning a lot.
Yeah.
A lot.
It's again another program, and obviously Cincinnati made the playoff under Luke Fickell's tutelage. But it's great to see. It's just great to see them up and in the mix with all of this. I think it's going to be, it'll be fun if they are in the mix in November all the way through. And that cluster of teams at the top of the Big 12 is just, they're fascinating because they're all flawed. They all do some things well, and they all seem like they forget how to play football certain weeks. So I love that contrast. Yeah,
it's gonna be it's fascinating. And like Utah, I don't know if did you see the Utah Colorado? I didn't see this game, but the halftime score against Colorado was 43-0, and they had 300 and some yards, and Colorado -15 at halftime.
I know. Dion came out and was basically like, I don't know what the heck happened there.
Yeah, I've never seen that before. Yeah. Actually, I'm a Jets fan. I've seen that before. So yeah, never mind.
But congrats to your Jets, by the way, today, picking up the first win of the season. So
yeah, didn't see a minute of it, but I'm glad they won.
So anyway, that'll wrap it up for football weather, as we are excited to, as always, talk about college football with you all, and a lot more coming up here over the course of the next couple of weeks. We've got our final week where there will not be college football playoff rankings this week.
Yep.
And then that week after, we're fully into it. So the games continue to get more important. We start to get some elimination games as we get ever closer to conference championship time. And then, of course, the playoff coming up about 7 weeks from now. So
crazy.
Stick with us here. Subscribe. Tell your friends. We'd love to have them listening to Football Weather and joining us here on the Back Home Network. Subscribe on Spotify or on Apple. Make sure to rate and review and follow the show. And we appreciate it, folks. For Matt Blaszka, I'm Galen Clavio. Say thanks for joining us here on Football Weather. We'll catch you folks on the flip side. So long, everybody.